Arkansas, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And we will add about 6 more states by the end of the year. So I think you're automatically entered into this competition if you receive certification. And we think that given the scope of the program, there's a lot of opportunity for recognition. A quick take on how you actually get certification. So for starters, you have to have a minimum qualifying score. And we ask you for some backup documentation. We don't ask you for any trade secrets, but we do want to see that you sort of said what you said, yes, I do this. We do some site visits ahead of certification, and we audit 10% of the organizations we've certified in the following year. Why do we do that? Because the partners here wanted to create a meaningful program, a substantive program, and because their names are also on the line. So we think that most businesses that do this have the right intentions, but you know, the chamber here, Duke and UNC don't really want to be in a position of having put their seal of approval on an entity which is kind of not doing great things out there. So we do kind of kick the tires, and the other thing that we'll ask you to do over time is to measure both your savings from the program and your conservation efforts. So we would love to come back a year later and talk with you about how much electricity you saved, what that meant for your bill, and what it meant for the planet. How you did on water, what you did to reduce your water consumption, what you did on waste. To sign up, you just go to our site, which is GoGreenPlus.org, and click on Join. And as I mentioned, there's a sole proprietor, a lower price point for the sole proprietor. If you're a sole proprietor, we ask you to do a brief exit interview because the needs of sole proprietors are a little different from larger organizations. And so we are kind of refining kind of the tool set and our kind of playbook to help sole proprietors too. Kirsten introduced herself. She is our client services director and probably the person with whom you'd have the most interaction once you got started in the program. Is anybody warm in here, or is it? I'm somewhat warm. Well, what if we open that back door? Okay. So I'd love to take any questions.
On a slide that said Arkansas, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, is that where this is just concentrated right now, and is the plan to start taking this to other states?
Yes. So it's been launched in 4 states, and as I mentioned, we are partnered with the American Chamber of Commerce Executives, which is not to be confused with the U.S. Chamber. The U.S. Chamber is an entirely separate organization. They're based in Washington. They focus on public policy stuff. The ACCE is the professional development and the education organization for chambers of commerce in the U.S. and Canada. And so we are talking with about 140 chambers literally from Vancouver to South Carolina or Florida, who are at some stage of becoming a partner or another. The states that have launched this or which are about to launch are the 4 that I've mentioned in the slide. But I think that by the end of this year, roughly, or early next year, we will also be in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York State, most likely Tennessee. We'll be in the Vancouver area, Southern California, Texas, and a couple of other places which escape me after a while. So the program really is designed to connect people across regions too, because there are great stories here and great people you could learn from here, but there might be some really interesting people that you also want some advice from, or maybe you want to do business with 2 states away. And what we're trying to do is to make that easy for you. Yep.
I've already got a list started with clients I think could take advantage of this, but I guess in the workplace is one thing, but what about the actual job that they do? You mentioned HVAC, builders, say home improvement folks. Is this something y'all could work with them on making their practice?
On an individual level?
I guess on the projects that they undertake. Say somebody's taking on doing an addition on a house.
Yeah.
would you be able to work with them on making that addition green? On how to make it greener?
What we look at currently is overall operation.
Okay.
So we encourage people, so in that case, for instance, I mean, we'd encourage people to work with a local green builder.
Right.
We'd encourage them to work with Common Grounds down the street. We, depending on how ambitious they were, we'd encourage them to work with LEED. So we want to help a smaller enterprise get on the path, but we're not a subject area expert in very specific areas like that. So a lot of our printers, for instance, they'll do Green Plus, which is about their broad practices, but ultimately they'll do the forestry certification, for example.
Okay.
Andrea, and then.
You mentioned site visits, and that is before the business is certified.
Mm-hmm.
How do you anticipate kind of maintaining that when this grows? And are there site visits after certification?
Yes. So her question was sort of how do we maintain the site visit process as the scope of this grows. So there are two pieces to this. The first piece is that the model between the universities and the chambers that we've set up here is a model that we're extending to other communities. So in a sense, think like franchise in a way. So in Cleveland, Ohio, there are 3 universities there that will work with their chamber that's quite large. In Columbus, they'll work with Ohio State University's MBA program. Penn State will work with a number of chambers in central Pennsylvania. So a lot of times universities and chambers don't exactly know how to work together to help small businesses in their community. And what we've tried to do is provide a model that basically gives students in any given community and universities a common language and a common toolbox to operate. And this was a big part of the mission with Duke in particular. They said, we want educational experiences for our students, but we also want them to be of service to the community while they're learning something. And so that really is part of the mission. In terms of how we'll do it in the long run, so we'll have some regional presence, but we will also have a main team that is triangle-based that will literally travel and go and audit 10% at least of the businesses each year. You had a question?
My question was on the certification. It says it'll run to the end of 2010. What's the recertification process look like?
The recertification process is threefold. We have first of all, a much lower fee for renewal. That is probably going to be about $100 against your annually, against the initial $350 investment you've made. The second part is that we will alter to some degree the question set each year. So we already have sort of the 3.0, the next generation question set. And that's because this field is changing. There are new things you can do, there are new things that we learn that are effective or not so effective. And so each year then that you would recertify, you would do another question set. And then finally, as I mentioned, we really want to measure with you what your savings have been, where you save some money, where you save some electricity, where you save some water, where you're not, where that garbage isn't heading off to the landfill. And so that measurement process is a third piece of this.
You mentioned that this was targeted towards small businesses, nonprofits, and that there are already a lot of resources that are there for the large corporations. What about the individuals, people who are trying to reduce their carbon footprint through their house, their actions, their cars, whatever? Are there? It takes expertise, it takes time to be able to do so. Are there services that are aimed towards that?
Well, the first part of this was, I think the notion behind reaching smaller employers was that you reach a lot of individuals. So to some degree, by participating in your workplace and developing a plan, you get some religion right there, and you get some expertise, and you're working with some folks who, in common cause on that. We don't have individual training yet. It's something that I could imagine emerging over time, but we're also trying not to reinvent the wheel here. We're basically really trying to provide a service in an area that has really been underserved. So it might be 2 years out that we have individual classes